This morning's scripture reading is Lamentations, chapter 3, verses 25 through 26. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, to the one who seeks him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord.
It may sound somewhat strange that it would be necessary for any church, any congregation, but especially a church or a congregation that has the name Church of Christ on the building, to need to return to first principles, especially a first principle such as focusing on Jesus. We have been looking for the past several lessons at a return to first principles. The first principle that we looked at was that of the nature of God and why that is important for us as disciples of Christ, that we would focus on the nature of God and who God is. Very, very, very closely related to that is the first principle of focusing on Jesus, and that is the lesson that we looked at last week. I wanted to present one more lesson in this series with the understanding that in the new year, 2025, Lord willing, if the Lord leads us into next year, I want to spend a little bit more time and focus once again a little bit more closely on the nature of Christ and Jesus and why we need to focus on Jesus. I do have a couple of examples, however, that illustrate or point to the necessity of focusing on Jesus for any church. The first example, I don't know how many of you would remember the name Ken Starr. That may be a pleasant name to you, or it might be a horrific, awful name to you. Ken Starr was the prosecutor, special attorney that was appointed to investigate Bill Clinton. And however you view Ken Starr, however you view Bill Clinton, or anything that transpired along that time frame, at one point, Ken Starr served, if I'm not confusing my stories here and not making a horrendous mistake historically, Ken Starr served as the president, I believe it was, of Pepperdine University in Malibu, California. If it was not president, he was certainly well up into the administration of Pepperdine University. Pepperdine University is associated with the Churches of Christ there in Malibu. And so while Ken Starr was serving as president there, I'm going to put him in that position whether he was or not. He might get a pay raise or a pay cut, I don't know. While he was there in Malibu, he attended one of the largest congregations of the Churches of Christ there in Malibu. Well, after a few years, he moved from Pepperdine University in Malibu, California, to Baylor University, and I believe Baylor is in Waco, Texas, to serve once again, if I'm not placing him in the wrong role, as the president of Baylor University. Baylor University is associated with the Baptist churches, and so while Ken Starr was serving as the president of Baylor University, he attended one of the largest Baptist churches there in Waco. And I'm only using Ken, I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent about his choice. I'm simply pointing out that he chose his congregation to attend according to his employment. And I have actually seen this more frequently in a couple of the places, the cities in which Susan and I have lived. A mayor will come in, or a high-ranking person will run for election and be elected to a particular office. And either while they are running for or after they have been elected to that particular position, they will seek out the largest religious Christian organization there in the city, and they will be a part of that church. It's not so much that their commitment to that particular denomination, that particular congregation, it's just that they feel like, as a leader of the community, particularly an elected official, they want to be amongst the people. My second example is quite a bit different. It comes to me from my first full-time work in the Lord's Church, where I served as a youth minister. And the phone rang one morning, and I'm not sure if the secretary directed the call to me, whether I answered the phone call, but this sweet little voice on the other end of the phone said that she and her husband would be traveling through the area, and she wanted to know if we were a conservative church, if we were an appropriate church for her to worship with. And as a young minister, I was somewhat cocky, somewhat arrogant, perhaps even a little bit more arrogant than just a little bit. Well, somehow or another, that put a burr under my saddle, and I wasn't exactly 100% sure what she was fishing for. I pretty much kind of knew. And so I asked her a question, or a couple of questions, what she was trying to get to, what exactly she was trying to ask, if we were a conservative, faithful congregation of the Churches of Christ. And after a question or two, I said, by the way, just to let you know, I'm the youth minister here. And that just was not acceptable. Oh, how can you be a youth minister? There's nothing in the New Testament about about a youth minister, and how can that congregation have a youth minister, and blah, blah, blah. She was rather upset with the fact that I was the youth minister. And somewhere in the conversation, she announced to me that she was a Church of Christer. I don't know if she swung her arm or not, but she really emphasized the fact that she was a Church of Christer. And I had never, ever, ever heard that phrase before. And it kind of set me back on my heels. And that particular conversation has stayed with me for all of my ministry. And I almost feel like that as she said that I could hear Alexander Campbell and Barton W. Stone rotating in their graves. Because that is literally exactly what they were fighting against, was the idea that we could put a name on a building and attach it to us and have that mean something. And so all of the early restoration leaders, and there were a number of them, I keep pointing to Alexander Campbell and Barton W. Stone because rightly or wrongly, they were kind of identified as the leaders of this, what has come to be known as the American Restoration Movement. Well, as a reminder, I want you to remember a couple of lessons ago, or several lessons, that I love the name Church of Christ. I have absolutely no problem using the name Church of Christ, as long as we understand that it is not so much a name as it is an identification of possession. We are the church that belongs to Christ. We are the church that was established by Christ. Paul, particularly in the Corinthian letters, but also in the Thessalonian letters, referred to the church as the church of God. And if we were to identify ourselves as the church of God, that would be perfectly scriptural, perfectly biblical, so long as, once again, we understand that it is not so much a name, in fact, it's not a name, period, but an identifier of who owns the church, who created the church, who redeemed the church. So it is not crazy. In fact, we might say that it is necessary occasionally to remind ourselves of who we are and who redeemed us, lest we fall into a similar trap. We never want to equate the church of God. We never want to equate the church of Jesus with some just physical association that we can join or drop out of based on our feelings of the day. Nor do we want to make the church, I'm using my little air quotes, the center of our commitment. Disciples of Jesus are committed to and focused on Jesus. This morning we return to the second of our first principles, and that is the principle of following Jesus, God's Son. And so as you grabbed a bulletin, or hopefully if you grabbed a bulletin this morning on your way in, you see there in the center column a few blanks that I will help you fill out. And if I miss one, you can grab me after the service. But this morning, I want to remind ourselves. This is not a new lesson for anyone, I don't believe, but I want to remind ourselves that Jesus is both fully God and fully man. What does that mean? And once again, we can spend weeks, months, perhaps even an entire year answering that question. But I wanted to go over just a few things this morning that I believe are important for us as we look at this topic. By the way, completely, totally aside, we are coming up on the Christmas season. There is a beautiful, relatively new Christmas song. I don't necessarily want to refer to it as a carol, but a beautiful Christmas song written by the Statler brothers, or sung by the Statler brothers. I'm not sure if one of the Statler brothers wrote it. I believe so. One of the phrases in that particular song is that we always knew that man would go to heaven, but now God has come to earth. And that lyric, I just love that concept. That Christianity is profoundly different from every other religion in this world. Because every other religion in this world is a process or an attempt for man somehow to claw his way up to whatever that religion considers to be a god. Or in some cases, there are religions that have no God, but a higher sense of reality, a higher sense of truth, or a higher sense of something like that. But it's always the bottom up. Religions start with man and try to end up somehow with God. Christianity completely and totally, 100% turns that upside down. Christianity begins with God and comes down to man. And in so doing, provides a way for man to be brought up to God. And so as we look at Jesus as being fully God and fully man, that leads to a couple of conclusions. Why is this so radically different? And that's the next line, that focusing on Jesus is radically different than focusing on the church. Because unfortunately, in the 2,000 plus years since Christ lived on the earth, many have taken the idea of the church of Jesus, the church of Christ, and turned it into a religion. And so even various churches will try to take man and get him to claw his way up to God. Jesus, once again, begins with God. And he brought God to earth in himself. So, two things that I wanted to emphasize. Number one, Jesus changes lives. Jesus changes lives. Religion, and if a church has completely sold itself to the concept of religion as opposed to following Christ, religion changes your affiliation. And so in the world of religion, and once again I'm using my little air quotes, in the world of religion, you can be a Buddhist one day, and over a period of time you can change yourself to be something else without really changing that much about your life. It's just a different path to walk on. It's just a different way to experience life. Jesus, once we get to know Jesus, changes your life. You can change your religion, the way I'm describing religion, the way I'm defining religion. You can change your religion and not change anything at all about your life. You may have a different philosophy, you may change a few practices, but it's not really going to turn your life upside down the way Jesus has in the times past, and even today will take somebody and just turn their life 180 degrees around, turn it upside down, however you want to describe that. Religion cannot do that for you. Never can, never has, never will. So as we commit ourselves to Jesus, we notice these changes. First of all, we are changed from being lost, and there's a lot of different ways that we can describe that, separated from God, alienated from God, to being found, to being accepted, to being brought home. So commitment to Jesus changes us from being lost to being found. Jesus himself said in John chapter 14 and verse 6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And no one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus says in Luke chapter 5, as he is conversing with the Pharisees, he says, those who are well have no need of a physician. Now, the irony here is he's talking to a group of people who are very, very much in need of a physician, but they don't think they are. And so Jesus says, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I have not come to call the righteous, parentheses, even though there are no righteous, into parentheses, but sinners to repentance. And it is fascinating as you read through the Gospels. It is those who need to be saved the most who recognize who Jesus is. So the first thing that Jesus saves us is from being lost to being found. The second change that Jesus makes in our life is the change from legalism to freedom. Once again, Jesus speaking in John chapter 8, verses 31 and 32. Jesus says, "If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." The word free becomes very important to the Apostle Paul. And as we've been studying on in our Bible class on Sunday mornings in the letter to the Galatians, as Paul's getting ready to kind of wrap up his letter, as he's getting ready to conclude his letter, he says in chapter 5 and verse 1, he says, "For freedom, Christ has set us free." I wonder if he's hearing, if he's remembering what John told him, perhaps, that Jesus told him that the truth will set you free. Paul says, "For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit to a yoke of slavery." Galatians chapter 5 and verse 1. So Jesus changes our life from that of legalism to a life of freedom. The third area, I guess you could say, that I wanted to say that Jesus changes us is from a life of activity and busyness to a life of mission. Anyone can be busy, and anybody can keep busy. And in fact, I would say if there is one malady that afflicts Americans, all of us, it's the idea of being busy and busyness. Even if we're not doing something important, we're busy. Somebody calls you up and says, "Hey, I've got some free time. How about you and I go out to the lake and go fishing?" "Oh, I can't. I'm too busy." "Well, I tell you what, I have 4 tickets to go up and watch the Denver Broncos." "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm just too busy." You know, being too busy to go fishing is just too busy. And unfortunately, I have allowed myself to be afflicted by that disease. And so one of my New Year's resolutions is that I'm going to busy myself in 2025 with a fishing pole. And somebody calls me up and says, "Hey, Paul, you going to do that?" I'm going to say, "Nope, I'm too busy. I'm going fishing." But we can be so busy that we don't even try to relax. We're just too busy to relax. But busyness is not a mission. Most all of us have jobs or have had jobs, and even if you're retired, you've still got jobs. If you have a car, your car's going to break down, your car's going to have problems, your house is going to have a leaky door, it's going to have a leaky faucet. Even gentlemen, if you're retired, you don't really leave your boss, you just get a new one. Ladies, probably the same thing happens with you. Having a job, though, does not mean we have a mission. Mission requires a purpose, a goal, a vision. It's interesting as we read through Paul's letters, we see how repeatedly he told his audiences, he told his congregations that the Holy Spirit has gifted each member of the Lord's church with an ability to turn a job into a mission. We see that in Romans chapter 12, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, Ephesians chapter 4, perhaps other places, perhaps not as specifically as those. But Paul is saying, whatever you have to do to keep yourself busy, whatever job you have, whatever busyness you have, you can turn that into a mission. And once again, I have a couple of examples. The first, wonderful lady heard this kind of sermon. Preachers love to preach these kinds of sermons. And so she heard this sermon and she thought, how in the world? She was a widow, didn't really have a lot of financial support, she didn't feel like, it was her role to go out and stand on a street corner and start preaching. But she thought, you know what? I can bake a pretty mean pie. And so she took it upon herself. Her mission was to be the pie missionary. And so she started focusing on her neighborhood. And if she saw somebody new, she saw the moving van come in, she was right there on the doorstep with a pie. Hi, I'm Sister so-and-so, and I wanted to greet you to our neighborhood. And by the way, I'm a member of such and such church down the street, and we sure would love to see you here on Sunday morning. And if I can do anything to help you move in or anything, you just let me know. And if she was aware of anyone in the neighborhood who was ailing, who was sick, she was there on the doorstep with a pie. Hi, I'm Sister so-and-so. Heard you're not feeling well. Hope this pie helps. And by the way, we have a wonderful congregation down the street. We would sure love to see you here on Sunday morning. And if there's anything I can do to help you I can do your laundry, if I can mow your lawn, if I can do this, you just let me know. And if I can't do it, I'll find somebody in the congregation who will. We just want you to know how important you are. I hope this pie helps. Or she knew of somebody having a celebration, a new baby, a high school graduate, or she just turned her ears up to super high fidelity. And she was just constantly trying to figure out what was going on in her neighborhood. And whenever she found out what was going on, whether it was good, bad, indifferent, she was right there on the doorstep with the pie. Hi, I'm Sister so-and-so, and I'm a member of the church down the street, and I want to see you here on Sunday morning. She was a pie missionary. And that was her mission. This next one always gets me. It was a sweet, sweet, sweet old man. Well, back when I was a teenager, he was an old man. Today, he would be a young man. Because I think I've probably moved beyond where he was when I considered him to be an old man. His job was to be the church janitor. His mission was to reach out to teenagers who kind of needed an arm around the shoulder, a pat on the back, a friendly visit. And he gave me, well, maybe not my first job, but he gave me a job cleaning windows in the church and straightening classrooms, straightening the desks in classrooms, throwing out the trash. And every once in a while, he would come up with a soda pop and just sit and visit with me. What a saint. What a saint. I doubt that very many people in that congregation knew his name. I guarantee you Peter knows his name. When he shows up, and I think he already has, to those pearly gates, Peter's going to say, welcome home, because you fulfilled your mission. He was just a janitor, if we can use the word just. Which is really a wrong way to say it. But beyond his job, he had a mission. And I will forever be in his debt. And so our goal, our quest, is to find ways and opportunities to turn our job, our vocation, our busyness into a mission, to point others to Jesus. And it might not be that we're a pie missionary. It may not be that we're a missionary of any kind. Maybe it's just that we see young people and we can see the ones who need an arm around the shoulder, a pat on the back, a friendly little gesture, a soda pop every once in a while to say, hey, how's it going? How's your life? You know, that is a mission to point others to Jesus. And Paul would say, the Apostle Paul would say, amen. Knock yourself out. My prayer for each of us here today, whether in this auditorium or by the video, is that we never, ever, ever transfer our allegiance to Jesus to the allegiance of a church. Let us first and last and always be disciples of Christ. And as we seek to follow him, let us let him change our life in these very profound and eternally important ways. Let him take us from lost to found. Let him move us from legalism to freedom. And let him move us from busyness to mission. If there is anyone this morning desiring to come to Christ, to take that step of discipleship, that first and important step of discipleship, to claim Jesus as the Son of God, to be buried with him in baptism. Perhaps just a special need, a prayer on your heart, a word of encouragement. It might be that there is some way that we as your Christian family can assist you this morning. We have this song that has been selected as an opportunity, a song of encouragement, song of invitation, we sometimes refer to it. If we can help you, would you let us know as we stand and sing?